So, Tim, one thing we haven't talked yet about in the last couple of weeks, Anthony Bourdain, because we have covered some of his stuff on this show, and
particularly right after the other Kate Spade.
Kate Spade.
And then that, I don't know, it's just one of those very bizarre moments. Sherman, a friend of ours
from Into the Badlands.
Noted actor, good friends with Anthony Bourdain.
Oh, I did not know that. Really?
Yeah. So he was really sort of devastated by that. But yeah, I don't know. It's a really odd thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a reminder that even people who seem to have it all don't have it all.
Yeah. You just really never know what's going on in somebody's head or what little dark things they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And I suppose mostly it just makes me appreciate my life.
Yeah.
I got all kinds of issues, all kinds of problems. I do not want to kill myself.
Bourdain did leave a great legacy, though, and that's the thing I think people can hang on to, which is, look, the guy had demons. He was suffering inside. If you know anybody who might be, just reach out to him. Isolation is the worst thing, especially in the age of social media, because when you're isolated, you feel even more isolated than ever before.
You know what was interesting? They were talking about all kinds of statistics around suicide, around those two events.
Yeah.
And suddenly you start hearing X number of people commit the suicide in this way and what kind of people and all of that. I did not know that way at the top of that list were white men over 50.
Yeah.
Way at the top of that list of people likely to, in some circumstance or another, and it breaks down in these sort of particular socioeconomic ways. But it's not as much as you would think about poor white men. No. And I just thought to myself, for one of the few times in my life, I am so glad I'm not a middle-aged white dude. This is awesome not to be a middle-aged white dude.
That's something. That's something that really warrants more study, to be honest, as to what kinds of. Is it perhaps drug related? That people at a certain level are there stress of jobs,
a lot of
family,
it seems
culture,
to be pressure and expectations.
Yeah.
In America, same thing in Japan too. By the way,
That's
pressure and
a good point,
expectations. A lot of it.
China.
Seems to be that.
I think there's a high suicide rate in China too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway,
I know I'm going to fail, so I don't even worry about it.
From that,
my mother did away with all that. I'm going to make sure you live a long time, son. You're going to fail at everything.
Oh man. Well, let's get into something positive, I guess. From suicide to World War I. I am holding in my hands a Blu-ray from the Cohen Film Collection, The King of Hearts, which is an absolutely delightful and wonderful movie from 1966, directed by Philippe de Broca. And I have to say the best thing about this is the audio commentary by yours truly.
Yes.
I had fun with this. This was a really great audio commentary to do. This is Cohen Film Collection's King of Hearts, the Philippe de Broca film from 1966. It's a really interesting movie because it's Philippe de Broca, again, a great French director. And this is a French film with great music by Georges Delerue and a great screenplay co-written with Daniel Boulanger. But it stars an English actor. It stars Alan Bates, who at the time was really kind of coming, he was part of that whole Peter O'Toole-y
angry young man,
hard drinking, hard living group at the time. And this is a really interesting kind of cheeky little movie about a Scottish soldier during World War I who the Germans are retreating from this, French village, and he's got to go in and disarm a bomb, which is quite likely connected to the clock tower. In any case, that's sort of the MacGuffin of this whole thing. There's, this village has been evacuated, and unbeknownst to him, the asylums from the inmates from the asylum nearby have gotten loose and occupied the village. So everyone in the village is literally a crazy person, and that's the sort of the conceit of the film. It's really very funny. It's incredibly well done. De Broca is just a master of framing and composition and the nuts and bolts of filmmaking. But it's a really seminal film as well. Pierre Lum, the great cinematographer, has an interview on here as well, and there's even a conversation between Geneviève Bujold and Anne Thompson. Originally, I was supposed to do the commentary with Vigil, but that just didn't happen, so I wound up doing it myself.
There's nothing harder than doing one of those all by yourself. I've never done one by myself, but I know you've done a few.
It's brutal.
I've always done it with you, or
you got nobody to bounce off of.
Sort of
tough. But it was a really fun commentary.
A neat little movie, Isabelle Huppert, called Souvenir. I kind of like this movie. In Europe, they have all of these singing contests, national singing contests, and then that big multinational singing contest. Like, what's it called? Eurosong or something?
Eurovision.
Eurovision, right?
Yeah.
But these sort of singing contests, not unlike our sort of the little things that we do. Only they're these national contests sponsored by the state government, and they've been going on for years. So in this particular movie, Isabelle Huppert is playing an older lady. She just works in a pate factory. Works in a factory. She gets a job. She hates it. And she has this young coworker, handsome young man, and he remembers her from many years ago when she was in that singing contest and won. And her life sort of went sideways, and here she is now. And they sort of fall into this relationship, and he's trying to make it as a boxer, and she decides she's going to make a comeback in that same contest. It's a very, very cute film. It's the kind of thing that I'm a little bit surprised hasn't been remade already here in the United States. I can see this with like Annette Bening or something like that,
Yeah.
Anyway, original features include the original theatrical trailer and a couple things like that. It's about 90 minutes long. Lovely on DVD, not Blu-ray, but very, very funny.
On the Beach at Night Alone this got a little bit of attention at the Berlin Film Festival, where it won Best Actress for actress Kim Min-hee. This is a Korean film from director Hong Sang-soo. And I'm not as fond of this as I think other people are. This is on Blu-ray from Cinema Guild. Includes a Q&A in it from the New York Film Festival with Hong Sang-soo, and a trailer and then an essay. It's incredibly well acted. It's really, really well acted. The idea basically it's a young actress who has had an affair with a director, which has gone south, and then has to kind of try to put her life together afterwards. A little bit touches on the Cannes Film Festival. It is, but it's a little bit sparse for my taste. It's well done, but it's very slow, and again, great performance, but not quite in my neck of the woods. But for some people, if you like the films of Hong Sang-soo, you will probably love it. Definitely in the same vein.
This Laurent Canet film is really, really good. I remember talking about this on the radio show. It's called The Workshop. A very intense sort of social.
And he did The
thriller.
Class, which won the film festival some years ago.
Yeah. Human Resource.
Human Resource is a really good movie.
Yeah, really good. And so this movie speaks to some of the contemporary things we're going on today, particularly in the wake of the many sort of mass shootings and school shootings that have been, here in the United States and in Europe and all those kind of places. So in this small sort of fishing sort of dockyard town outside Marseille, that sort of the town is sort of fading away. And a fairly sophisticated and noted writer goes to hold a workshop there with 7, lower socioeconomic scale young people. Young French people who are, black and Arab and, white, but French.
Yeah.
All of them French.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of ethnic dynamic going on.
Which was in The Class, too.
Yeah. That was the whole thing. I love that movie. And this is interesting in that what they're supposed to be doing is brainstorming a story. And one of the young men keeps coming back to a story that involves a mass murder in a school. And he's a brilliant writer.
Wow.
And sort of conceptualizer. And as he conceptualized this story as they're sitting there, it makes everyone quite upset. And Olivia, who's playing the teacher, she wants him to be able to be creative, but at the same time, she's uncomfortable with the way this fictional story that comes from his head is going to, because it's seeming a little too real to her. And it's about that line, that borderline between. And man, it's a really, really good movie, well acted. A gripping thriller in and of itself, but so socially relevant that you can't help but appreciate it. DVD here, not a Blu-ray, not a lot on it, unfortunately, but it's one of those situations where the movie is worth it all by itself.
Fantastic. Got some Asian stuff here, Chinese specifically. The Monkey King 3 is the 3rd installment in the new Monkey King series. Now, Monkey King is a character that goes deep into martial arts movie mythology. I personally prefer the older, cheaper Monkey King movies. Aaron Kwok, who plays the Monkey King here, underneath a whole lot of makeup, deserves better, I think. It's opulent. It's got CGI and, wire work and all that stuff galore. Just a little bit too splashy for my taste. Nonetheless, there is kind of an Amazonia, a Chinese version of an Amazonian society here. Reminds you a little bit of the Wonder Woman movie. And that's sort of interesting. It's got a lot of fantasy and magic and all that kind of stuff in it. And, it's okay. I mean, it's fine. If you've seen the previous two Monkey King films, it's more of the same.
Yeah.
If you are familiar with the Monkey King as a character in older films, much more entertaining. And then we got some giveaway stuff here. Paradox. We've got 2 to give away. 2 copies of Paradox from Wellgo. Send us an email to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com with the word Paradox in the subject line and your name and address in the body of the email. And make sure that the email gets to us by the 2nd, Monday, July 2nd, and we will pick a winner and send 2 very happy people a copy of Paradox. Now, what is Paradox? Well, Paradox is a slam-banging action film, which is part of the SPL films. If you saw, SPL Killzone, directed by Wilson Yip, who also did 3 Ip Man movies, then you know exactly what to expect. This is sort of the most brutal of Hong Kong filmmaking and the most brutal of Thai filmmaking, all combined in the same movie. Louis Koo plays basically a Hong Kong cop who's looking for his daughter in Thailand, kind of like Liam Neeson in Taken, and he has to really kind of bend some rules along with a couple of local type cops, one of whom is Tony Jaa. And it's explosive and it's violent and it's bone crushing and a lot of great stuff in it. Interesting to see Tony Jaa in kind of a supporting performance here. Again, not the featured player here. It's Louis Koo who's the star, but still, it's a good film and it delivers the goods on an action level in ways that even Hollywood movies still can't figure out. Plus Thailand and Hong Kong have just done, set the new bar for those films.
Because they're hardcore.
Yeah,
aren't they? The Good Postman, man, a Bulgarian film. This is such a good film. It's set in a town in Bulgaria that faces Turkey. And basically, this little town for eons has been sort of like the gateway between the sort of Ottoman Empire, the Turks, and their gateway into Europe.
Yeah.
And sort of preventing, everyone from traveling through. And here we are in 2016, 17, 18. And you have all of these refugees seeking asylum, trying to get from various different places through Turkey and out of Turkey and into Europe, Italy. We hear these stories every day. And what's going on in this town is they're having to decide what they're going to do, if they're going to continue to be a blockade against people seeking asylum, or if they're going to open what is called the gate and let these people flow through. So it's about the humanity of the whole thing, and it's sort of set around one particular old lady who has decided that she's going to simply start taking care of some people. It's quite a powerful film, extremely apropos to the day, that's for sure. This is in Bulgarian with English subtitles. Unfortunately, not a whole lot on it. Otherwise, it's a DVD, not a Blu-ray. The Postman. The Good Postman, thank you. The Good Postman.
Not to be confused with the Il Postino Postman.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let's go into this. Moonchild. This is a film by Augusti Villaronga. And this is a cult epics release.
I remember that movie. Early 80s.
Yeah, late 80s, 89. Late 80s, 89. This is this is very much in the Spanish surrealism kind of realm. This is apparently inspired by a 1923 novel of the same name, Moonchild, by an author named Aleister Crowley. I am not familiar with the novel or the novelist, but Aleister Crowley was apparently
all these sort of spooky novels back in the day about occultist sort of stuff, seances and stuff like that.
And so it winds up being very, very eerie and weird weird and creepy in that way that you get with a lot of the Spanish surrealism, all the way from Dali all the way up through what's his name,
Buñuel
and the Dune guy. What
was the Dune guy.
So the guy who didn't make Dune. Anyway, so yeah, it's and the director Jodorowsky. Thank you very much. Anyway, it's very mystical. It's very surreal. It has kind of a cool soundtrack. The music is by a band called Dead Can Dance. Not familiar with them either. Are you familiar with them?
Dance. Yeah,
See, I'm so not hip. I'm so out of it.
They're not hip anymore either, so it's okay.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so there's a 12-year-old kid here, Enrique Saldana, who has been adopted into this cult, and people are psychic, and it winds up being this bizarre sort of altered statesy sort of journey of the mind, journey of experience for this kid and this group of people. It's very, very weird, beautifully photographed, but very surreal. Anyway, that's probably more than you want to know about this movie. But if you're into that kind of filmmaking, DVD and Blu-ray together in a dual combo set of Moonchild from Cult Epics, filmed by Auguste Villaronga.
Another quick little Spanish film. Despite of the way it sounds in the context of its narrative, because it's about a guy who's in an accident and becomes a paraplegic, this is a hell of a funny little comedy. And it is about a guy who's in an accident and becomes a paraplegic. And his friends decide to throw him a party to sort of make him feel better. And a text is sent out, one of these sort of like group texts is sent out about this party at Milo's house. And somehow that starts to get translated about among the many, many people that it gets sent to as an orgy rather than a party. And everyone starts to think there's going to be this big old orgy at Milo's house, and they send texts to other people, and before you know it, at Milo's mansion, there's a whole bunch of people up there looking to do it. and which, to the guy in the wheelchair seems interesting. Somebody brings a foam gun. Anyway, it turns out to be quite funny. It's called Foam Party. It's a little bit sexy and cheeky. And again, this is a DVD, not a Blu-ray, without a whole lot on it, but the movie's really, really funny and sweet. You should check it out in Spanish, English subtitles.
All right, I'm going to blow through some kid vid here real quickly. For a change, we don't have a lot of Disney here, but we got some Nickelodeon, some PBS Kids, and we're going to start off with a Warner title, Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, Emerald City. This is an animated appendage to the Wizard of Oz saga. 10 episodes in this very strange little series that is not really necessary. It's not really taken from the novel, the books, the stories. It just sort of uses the characters to create a little animated series all their own. Look, you're better off watching the movie, but if you need something to sort of keep your kids occupied, and it's not terrible animation, it's perfectly fine, but I'm not sure why we need to keep doing that. PJ Masks Save the Summer. The very young skewing PJ Masks is back from E1 Entertainment with 6 episodes. This is all, they're like little superheroes who dress largely like animals or whatever. And it's all very, very educational. A little bit too much so, but it's fine. It's innocuous. We do have one from Disney DuckTales Destination Adventure. I'm not too fond of the way that they've redone Professor Von Drake and Huey, Louie, and Dewey and Webby and Scrooge McDuck and, that whole thing. I'm not particularly fond of this new animation that they're doing. It's a little too angular, a little too not classic, but they do include some fairly decent extras on here. So, if your kids are into the new stuff and not like I am into the old stuff, you'll probably respond to it just fine. A couple from Lionsgate, who continues to find some really interesting animation. These are both from Grindstone through Lionsgate. Now, Grindstone is that company that does a lot of stuff through Lionsgate. Most of them are really bad, like Steven Seagal and Bruce Willis action movies, sometimes a Robert De Niro movie. But they also have family stuff. One of these is live action. The other one is animated, and the first one is Turtle Tail. That's it's I shouldn't say it's animated. It's a live action feature with animals, CGI animals, and some great voice talents behind them. So it's kind of that hybrid, that live action animation hybrid thing. Anyway, The story is really not much. It's just talking animals, especially a talking turtle. And so it's a little bit more like one of those dog movies or those dog and cat movies, except it's all about a turtle and a frog, and it's just swapping animals. But the voice talents are actually not bad. Tom Arnold is really really good, and Amber Childers and Lydia Hull are also really good. So yeah, it won one of those Dove approved things for whatever that's worth. The other one, I just don't know what to make of this. Pause PI. This is one of those dog movies, and the only thing that makes this in any way not a total embarrassment is the fact that John Lovitz does the voice of the dog. I don't know if that's a selling point, but John Lovitz's voice just makes me laugh. So there it is. Pause PI, a dog private eye movie with some really bad slapstick and the voice of John Lovitz as the dog.
Interesting.
From Nickelodeon, and I'll wrap this out with Nickelodeon and PBS Kids. From Nickelodeon, we've got The Loud House, Season 1, Volume 2. Very aggressive animation, I would say, for older kids, a little bit preteen, not for younger kids. If they've already started to go to school and they know how chaotic school is, or if they grow up with siblings and they know how chaotic that is, The Loud House is not going to do any harm. If your child is quiet and you're trying to teach them good manners, do not show them that show.
No, that would not be helpful.
Sunny Day from Nickelodeon, strictly for girls. This is all just about, being girly girl and hair and styling and fashion and all that kind of stuff. It's all about, this really fashionable young girl and trying to save her little dog from the dog catcher, and everything's just hopelessly cute, not for boys. And then the Great Summer Campout is a collection of things from Nickelodeon shows. This is one of their potpourri releases: Bubble Guppies, Shimmer and Shine, Blaze, Sunny Day, and Nella the Princess Knight. It's just one episode of each of those shows, kind of a sampler. They do this every once in a while. And then the 3 PBS Kids include Dinosaur Train, Meeting New Friends. Still a really sharp show, very educational, well-animated, well-written. I enjoy this show. 8 stories here, 8 episodes of the Pteranodon family in their modern Stone Age or modern Jurassic thing. Double feature from Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood. Daniel Goes Camping and Tiger Family Trip. And then the last one is something I had not seen. So, we've switched up my daughter's viewing a little bit, so we're not watching as much of the original PBS Kids stuff as we used to. We're watching a lot of stuff that we have recorded on the DVR. I did not even know about this show. This is Splash and Bubbles from the Jim Henson Company. Same people that do Dinosaur Train. It's called One Big Ocean. And it's kind of like the Henson response to Finding Nemo and Finding Dory. There are 6 episodes here, and it's very much in the same vein as Dinosaur Train. It's educational, and it mixes the educational in with the narrative, and except it's set in the ocean, and they're telling you all about the ocean and all about fish and oceanography and ocean wildlife and kelp forests. So that stuff is really, really interesting, and I think I'm definitely going to make this part of our daughter's viewing going forward. Splash and Bubbles from Jim Henson on PBS Kids. One Big Ocean is the title.
Jim Henson, still turning them out. A couple of newbies over here. You got some other stuff.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what? No, that's good. That's good.
I'll knock off a couple of these. Again, another interesting movie I happen to have seen on the old radio show Terminal. Guy who directed this movie, a guy named Vince, what's Vince's last name? Vince Stein, right?
Okay.
Vince Stein was second unit director, second assistant director, first assistant director on a whole bunch of big movies. Big movies. Harry Potter movies, World War Z, goes all the way back to like Dark Knight, in those kind of positions on those movies, right? He's only directed 3 films. This is one of them, Terminal. He got Margot Robbie, Simon Pegg, and Mike Myers in this thing, right? And then I'm thinking about how the hell did he do that? But if you look through some of those movies that he was a second unit, first assistant director, and all that kind of stuff on, these people worked on at least one of those films somewhere. I'm thinking this guy knows how to glad hand and network. And he networked himself while working on those big movies into a cast for his Little Terrible movie.
Yeah.
Because that's what this is, Little Terrible movie. It's it's a little too esoteric for my taste. You got Mike Myers, you got Simon Pegg, you got Margot Robbie. They're in this sort of anonymous city, almost like a Sin City sort of situation. She's a waitress at this little diner. Simon Pegg is a customer at this diner. He
Yeah.
seems to be sick. He eventually realized that he is sick. Mike Myers is dressed up in all this wacky costume as this sort of train station attendant, and then you got a couple of hitmen who are waiting on an assignment, and all of these completely disparate things are woven together into one wacky narrative
Yep.
that has a central mastermind sort of controlling everything and pushing everyone toward their ultimate end.
Nice.
And I'm like, okay, this is all fine, except that Margot Robbie just got nominated for an Oscar like 30 seconds ago. You know? And shouldn't be in this movie. Simon Pegg, he's in the Star Trek movies and the Mission Impossible movies and all that kind of stuff. Why the hell is he in this movie? Mike Myers kind of comes and goes around and does all kinds of stuff. You wonder, and I'm thinking, hey, they're just buddies of this guy, and they made this goofy movie with him, and they probably shouldn't have done that. Because this is just not that good. Anyway, special features include a building of the world of Terminal, because it's sort of a big set piece movie. Kind of all takes place on just a set someplace. And it's highly conceptual, but it didn't quite work for me. Terminal. Acrimony. Tyler Perry's Acrimony, written and directed by Tyler Perry, without that goofy character that he plays in here at all, which is great. I kind of like Tyler Perry movies in which Tyler Perry is not.
Yeah.
When he's not in them playing Medea or anybody, he's just not in them. Those movies are kind of okay.
Yeah.
There's just genre movies, certainly. They have a little bit better production value than, say TV or something like that. But, he gets some actors in them and he does them straight ahead in whatever the manner of the genre is. And they come out okay. This one, Taraji P. Henson plays a rich and powerful woman who's married to a rich and powerful guy. He cheats on her a little bit. And you know what? He ought not have done that.
Yeah.
Ought not have done that to Taraji, sorry. Anyway, Hell Hath No Fury, Acrimony. A lot of fun. Blu-ray, DVD, digital. A few features on it. The Unleashing of Acrimony, just a little video featurette kind of thing. Escape of Prisoner 614. I got to tell you, this Ron Perlman in this movie, Martin Starr.
He's so good.
It's a Western about these two goofy deputies, right, in the small town. And they capture this guy who escaped from prison, but they know this guy was wrongly convicted, and they have to figure out what the hell they're going to do about it. And it's just pretty damn good. It's kind of a Western, but it's a modern-day Western. And Ron Perlman is as good as he is in anything in this movie. Again, not a lot of special features on it, but you got your Blu-ray, digital, Ultra DVD. What the heck? Check it out. Ron Perlman, The Escape of Prisoner 614.
All right, and we have next something that's going to tie into the end of the show today, The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. Now, this is a really interesting thing. The filmmaker of this is a friend of ours, Michael Schlesinger. Michael is a fascinating guy, a sort of a legendary figure in repertory distribution at a number of studios. We'll get into all of that a little bit later. But Columbia and MGM, and he's been responsible for keeping a lot of classic movies on screens all around you. And he decided he wanted to write and direct a really cool throwback to those old comedy shorts, stuff like Three Stooges and Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy. And so with the help of two very, very talented actors, Nick Santamaria and Will Ryan, who have this act already, Biffle and Shooster, they sat down and they made a series of shorts.
Part Laurel and Hardy, part Abbott and Costello, part all of the Three Stooges.
Yeah, Marx Brothers maybe a little bit. Yeah,
just a little bit of all of it.
And it's really, really fun. And we'll tell you a lot more about it later. The Biffle murder case, Imitation of Wife, Schmoboat, Bride of Finkelstein, and It's a Frame-Up, which was the first one they made. It's the last one here. Tons of stuff on here. Commentary on all of them by Michael and the stars. There's even like additional stuff that they shot, and he'll talk about it as well. It's a ton of extras, and this is so much fun. You will laugh and laugh and laugh. You just won't believe how funny it is, and it all looks as if it was shot in about 1935 or 1939. It's really quite clever. So that is The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster by Michael Schlesinger, and we're going to wrap the show up with that interview today. So stay tuned for that. And now, more
where
stuff
we going?
with some, we got some giveaways. One more new title to talk about, The Endless. And this is a really interesting science fiction film from this directing team known as Moorhead and Benson. I'm not familiar with Moorhead and Benson. You familiar with Moorhead and Benson? Previously made a film called Spring. Anyway, this is from Welgo. It's one of Welgo's occasional non-Asian titles. And the idea is that you've got these two brothers who have escaped. 10 years earlier, they'd escaped from this UFO death cult, kind of like... what was the thing with King?
That crazy thing down in San Diego.
King Doe, those
with
guys
the guy with the crazy Martin Winkle, whatever his name
sort
is.
of something like that.
Yeah.
And they have to go back after 10 years for reasons that are explained in the movie, and all kinds of strange phenomena suggests that the things may not have always been as they appeared.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a sharp film. It's really well made. One of those that I wish had been properly released in theaters because it would have done really well. Audio commentary with the directors, a lot of making of and deleted scene stuff, and we are going to give away 2 of these to anyone who emails it to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com. Put endless in the subject line, name and address in the body. Make sure it gets to us no later than July 2nd, and we will make 2 people happy. Here is what else we're going to give away, thanks to Paramount. Some things that we reviewed a few weeks ago. We're going to be giving away 2 4Ks of Terminator Genesis.
Oh, yeah.
2 4Ks of Forrest Gump.
Oh, yeah.
2 Blu-rays of Trading Places 35th anniversary. 2 Blu-rays of Coming to America 30th anniversary. And 2 copies of the Jerry Lewis 10-film collection on DVD. So
young Eddie Murphy and young Jerry Lewis.
This is Christmas, folks, because Paramount is being really cool. Now, remember, for the Paramount stuff, cannot be sent to a non-U.S. address. So all of this stuff, the other stuff, you can anyone who's overseas can certainly send us an email, like for Endless. But for these titles, got to be a U.S. address. So if you want to be considered for Terminator Genesis, send us an email to, all of this goes to gods@digigods.com or gods@cinegods.com, and it has to be here by July 2nd, has to have your name and address in the body of the email. In order to be in for the Terminator Genesis giveaway, just put Terminator in the subject line. If you want to be in for Forrest Gump, put Gump in the subject line. That'll get you in for the 4K of each of those. For the Blu-rays of Trading Places and Coming to America, put Places in the subject line for Trading Places, and put America in the subject line for Coming to America. And for the Jerry Lewis 10-film collection on DVD, just put Jerry in the subject line. And we will have some fantastic giveaways, and we'll be finalizing all of that on July 2nd. Probably reach out to you on the 3rd or the 4th and let you know if you won. So with that, we're gonna dive into some classic movies now, and we've got a couple of really interesting ones to start off with from Classic Flicks, which is a company we have not dealt with before, but we are happy to welcome them to our roster of companies. And Classic Flicks is doing basically a licensing thing that a lot of other companies do, going there and mining the titles of studios for things that nobody else has released, and the studios don't seem to have the time or the inclination to go out and market themselves. And thank goodness, because these are both really terrific films, both of them with Gary Cooper. The first one, Gary Cooper and Teresa Wright, my beloved Teresa Wright she's so good. Shadow of a Doubt, and Mrs. Miniver, and so many other great movies. So Gary Cooper and Teresa Wright in Casanova Brown, directed by the great Sam Wood, and written by Nunnally Johnson from the Floyd Dell and Thomas Mitchell play. This was a United Artists film.
Frank Morgan in that movie too.
Yes, a great Frank Morgan. This was a United Artists film in 1944 when first released, now part of the MGM library. And, Casanova Brown is otherwise known as Casanova Q. Brown, who is a professor played by Gary Cooper. And it's one of those hometown things, He goes back hometown hoping to find, hook up with his girl again. In any case, the wedding does not go as planned, and things go in a completely unexpected direction, and it is just delightful and wonderful, and it's just so smart. Nunnally Johnson, one of the great screenwriters of all time.
Yeah.
Sam Wood, a certainly workmanlike studio guy. And Gary Cooper and Teresa Wright, it just doesn't get any better unless it's Gary Cooper and Loretta Young in Along Came Jones, which is also just a great film.
Also Nunnally.
Also written by Nunnally Johnson. This one directed by Stuart Heisler, also a very talented studio guy.
The great William Demarest in that movie.
Yeah, gosh, it is so good.
I just love saying these people's names. These are the movies.
I know.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah, I grew up on them too, man. It's great. And this was made the following year in 1945. And this is Western stuff. This is putting Gary Cooper into his Western mode, which is always refreshing and welcome. It's a romance as well. It's based on a 1943 novel called The Useless Cowboy, which wouldn't have been a very great title for the movie. But it's a really, really funny script. It's really amusing. It's very sweet and romantic. And apparently the idea here is that Gary Cooper is kind of trying to do a bit of a spoof in the way that he performs the characters. But regardless, he and Loretta Young are just a delightful couple, and I can't say enough about this movie. It's delightful. Along Came Jones and Casanova Brown, both of them from classic flicks, and on beautiful Blu-ray transfers. Just doesn't come any better.
The reincarnation of Peter Proud. Believe it or not, I went to see this movie in 1975. I think I was about 14 years old. So, directed by J. Lee Thompson. So I want to say to my mom, what the hell were you thinking? At 14 years old, you let me go see this spooky-ass movie? Come on, lady. The Reincarnation of Peter Proud. Michael Saracen film, Jennifer O'Neill, Margot Kidder, the recently late Margot Kidder, who I think I probably fell in love with in this movie even before Superman. I think she was in Superman the next year, playing Lois Lane. So this movie is a reincarnation movie. It's about a guy named Peter Proud. And one of the reasons why I wanted to go see the movie is the guy's name was Peter Proud. You're 14. You want to go see a movie with a character named Peter Proud. Had no idea what it was about. But it's a fairly sophisticated movie about reincarnation. This guy starts experiencing these flashbacks, and he's drawn to this place and to this woman that he ostensibly does not know. She is the reincarnation of his... It's a whole thing. Really, really interesting. The kind of movie that could probably be remade today. I mean, in the context of great cinema, it's not that good. But in the context of narrative, of story, it's a really interesting sort of storyline. Remade today might be kind of interesting. This has all kinds of wonderful special features on the Blu-ray, audio commentary by a film historian, several different languages, an animated photo gallery, original this, that, and the other thing, the trailer and booklet. It's really, really neat. The Reincarnation of Peter Proud. Check it out.
Got some Warner Archive titles, all of them on DVD-R. These are manufacturer on demand, and they're all wonderful. This is really reaching very, very, very deep into the archive here. The Great Meadow is this is early talkie stuff, like 1931, pre-code, and they put the original artwork on the DVD, which I am so grateful for, because it's that cool kind of poster artwork drawing, like it's just, when people took time to do artwork,
hand drawn, beautiful and painted,
and it says a Metro Goldwyn Mayer all talking picture. And what never dawned on me, and I want to emphasize this, in that really cool kind of Art Deco lettering, the all is italicized.
Oh, interesting.
Because the jazz singer, if you remember, was not all talking. There were other movies too where it was a silent movie, and then there'd be a little
somebody would say something,
an interlude of music or something, and they wanted to make sure you knew, oh, this isn't just a talking picture, this is an all talking picture. They talk from beginning to end, and that's just so charming.
Love it.
Anyway, this is a Daniel Boone story. The Great Meadow is a Daniel Boone story, and we got to remember that in 1931, Daniel Boone is not that far in the rearview mirror. Daniel Boone, in all fairness, Daniel Boone is Revolutionary War period, and that's not much more than 100 years before 1931. So, 1931 is almost 100 years ago.
Yeah.
So, there's probably a few grandchildren of Daniel Boone floating around. So the colonial period is still something that they mine a lot in silent films and in early sound films. And this one is, if you can get past your memories of Fess Parker on the TV show, you'll actually really, really enjoy it. It's quite well done. And it's a surprisingly smart little script. And I enjoyed it. There's also Calm Yourself with Robert Young and Madge Evans, which is also a pre-code, I think, 1935. It feels like a pre-code film. I'd have to double check and make sure. I think 35, 36 was about when the code kicked in. Directed by George Seitz, and Robert Young is basically a businessman who gets fired for kissing the boss's daughter and then decides he's got a great idea for a business, which is basically you will do the things that other people don't want to do. You do the dirty work, and people will pay you to do their dirty work for you. Anyway, so he starts an agency that specializes in this kind of work, and it's actually very funny and goes in directions you would never expect. And then the last one, I find the premise of this to be absolutely hilarious. Absolute quiet. It's fun to be thrilled is the tagline here. This stars Lionel Atwill, Irene Hervey, and Raymond Walburn. This is another all-talking Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer picture, but they didn't say all-talking by this point because it's 1936, so apparently everything is all-talking by 1936. Anyway, the story here is, it's very simple. Absolute quiet is what the lead character here, played by Lionel Atwill, desperately wants. He's a millionaire who's had a heart attack, and he needs to recover in quiet and silence and peace. And he can't do it because there are these escaped criminals whose plane crashes on his ranch, and it creates mayhem and havoc, and he can't get the quiet that he needs to recuperate. It's a really fun screwball concept. I can't believe that nobody has done something similar to this or even remade this exact film.
Remake it.
It's really very charming. It's really clever. You could do so much more with it today and all the resources that we have. So that's called Absolute Quiet from 1936.
On Blu-ray, Edward II, Derek Jarman's Edward II from 1991, which he made one of his last films. I think he died in about 1993. One of the early young artist, young filmmakers to succumb to the AIDS epidemic at that time. Of course, this is based on Christopher Marlowe's Edward II, but it's done all in modern dress. With the language, but in modern dress, and because it's Derek Jarman, it's kind of gay. Because he's Derek Jarman. It's quite an intense adaptation. And Tilda Swinton, fairly young Tilda Swinton, shows up in this movie, which I had forgotten, to be honest with you. This is from Film Movement Classics. It really is a mesmerizing film starring Steve Waddington and Andrew Tiernan. It also comes with bonus features, including a documentary featurette and an essay and Bruce, a program by Bruce LaBruce, which, by the way, is also kind of gay. Because Bruce don't play, baby. Go.
We got some Criterions here. Tim's got one there, and I've got 3 over here. It's a great month for Criterion. So from 1975, I'm going to give you the obscure one first. We got 2 classics from totally opposite ends of the spectrum, and then an obscure one here, and then Tim's got another one that's really kind of interesting. Manila, In the Claws of Light, is a Filipino film from 1975, entirely in the Tagalog language, because some Filipino films are in English and sometimes other languages.
Sometimes it's Spanish.
Sometimes it's Spanish, This is entirely in Tagalog. And this is the film that put Lino Broca, the great Filipino director, on the international map. It's really, really, really good. And I am not normally a Lino Broca fan, but I had never seen this film. I'd never seen Manila in the Claws of Light. I've seen subsequent films. I wish all the subsequent films were like this. It's really, really great. It takes a look at Manila and what had happened to it in the 1970s. And it's really, really, I don't want to call it quite neorealism, but it's kind of like the Filipino version of neorealism, but it's a little bit melodramatic, and somehow it walks the line between those two things, and I'm not quite sure why, but it's got a real sensibility all its own about this, focusing on this fisherman from a village. who's looking for his girlfriend, and what happens to him in the meantime. It starts to feel kind of like if Douglas Sirk had made The Bicycle Thief,
Ah,
you know?
yeah.
And you're like, how does that work? It works somehow. It's really, really good. Tons of extras here. A documentary from 1987 by Christian Blackwood, which is all about Lena Broca. And it's just really good. Manila in the Claws of Light. And then the other two that I have are, of course, John Waters' Female Trouble and Ingmar Bergman's The Virgin Spring. You could not have two more opposite films.
Man.
And yet they are both Criterion. That tells you how the people at Criterion just really keep their focus broad. Female Trouble was made in 1974, and it's not as famous as Pink Flamingos, but it also stars Divine, and it is a John Waters film. What am I going to tell you? It's shot on 16 millimeter, and it's got Mink Stoll and, you know, Edith Massey and the whole John Waters crew in it. And it's, you know, the idea is that crime is beauty, and it just winds up being a shock fest, one thing after the other. And you realize that it's just John Waters. It's, you know, he can do whatever he wants.
That's John.
The Virgin Spring from 1960 is one of my favorite Ingmar Bergman movies. This won Best Foreign Language Film Academy Award for the year 1960, and is taken from a new 2K digital restoration. It is based on a kind of a classic Swedish story. This is not an original story by Bergman, but he adapted it, of course, to his own for his own filmmaking and storytelling style, which is it's a period film about a young woman who is the village virgin who is raped and murdered by this gang of kind of ne'er-do-wells, and how her father, played by Max von Sydow, swears revenge on them. And it's really an extraordinarily well-made film.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's myth-making, and it's sort of epic and intimate at the same time, and just unbelievably beautifully photographed. So you should check this out. Includes a lot of really, really great stuff in the extras. Audio commentary from 2005 when they first released it on DVD by Ingmar Bergman scholar Birgitta Steen. And then there are also some interviews that they shot at the same time. Ang Lee did an interview for that DVD that's also adapted here. And then a 1975 American Film Institute seminar by Bergman, which was recorded in audio only. They put that on here as well. So it's terrific. It's really good.
I'm going to give you El Cir, the Spanish film to talk about from that collection in a second. But I'm going to knock off this Bowling for Columbine, Michael Moore's film, of course, which is a document, 2002 document of the 1999 tragic Columbine shootings in Colorado.
This, and much as I don't like Michael Moore, I will say this is some of my favorite moments in any Michael Moore film.
Yeah, he is as close to actually making a documentary in this film as he ever has in any film. Michael Moore doesn't actually make documentaries, people.
But the stuff in here in particular with Marilyn Manson is great.
Yeah. Now,
really
there's also the stuff in here with Charlton Heston, which is not great.
True.
Because he sort of cast Charlton Heston in a light that was untrue to the character of Charlton Heston, because he stands there with that rifle at the NRA, you know, whatever. He's
and he's suffering from Alzheimer's already.
And, you know, and it's he
sandbags him at his house.
He takes him out of context. Charlton Heston, of course, was a great civil rights leader.
Marched with Martin Luther King.
And the NRA was only beginning to become the organization then that it has become now. It was at the NRA. I'll put it this way: at that time, or before this, not long before this, I had been in the NRA. You know, I'm a veteran, dude. 6 years, United States Air Force. There are people who still call me Sergeant Cogshell.
Yeah.
So got a lot of guns. But you know, the organization's changed. Nevertheless, Michael is sort of ignoring that. But this documentary about this tragic event, which in some ways launched the 20+ year long string of these sort of events, actually comes upon something extremely powerful here. It's a powerful documentary. This is of course his Criterion collection, so it's approved by the director. There's a documentary here featuring Moore. Chief archivist Carl Deal, who works with Michael on just about everything that he does, has gathered together all of the programs and festival interviews and just all of the things that circulated around the time, news interviews and stories. The film was coming out. So if you want to sort of review where all of this began and how it has led us to where we are now, pick up this director-approved Bowling for Columbine by filmmaker Michael Moore.
El Sur is a movie I had never heard of. And
Spanish director.
Yeah, Victor Eris.
Beautiful film.
Made it in 1983, and it's kind of like the Spanish magical realism, all set around the experience of this young, kind of again against the backdrop of the Spanish Civil War, this young girl and her father, and it's really beautiful to look
at. Quite lyrical film.
Jose Luis Alcaine is the cinematographer. I'm dying to see other movies that he shot because this just kind of came out of the blue. So yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting film. Curious to see some more of the films from the people that made this, and a lot of great extras on here as well. A new program on the making of the film from 2012, and a really very smart subtitle translation, which is brand new. That's nice and crisp. And then there's also this 1996 television episode with Spanish film critics that are talking about the film, which is kind of interesting, gives you a little bit more on the backdrop. So El Sur, Elsur, a film by Victor Eris, worth checking out. Criterion will dip deep in sometimes and just give you something that you've never heard of.
Interesting stuff. Are we gonna dip into some of this
let's go.
Stuff right here. Blu-ray, Curse of the Cat People, a Robert Weiss film. Gunther von Frisch, but a Robert Weiss film nevertheless. Simon, Ken Smith, Jane Randolph. Well, this is just a neat movie. What are you going to say? Curse of the Cat People, just a wonderful atmosphere, black and white, 1944 film. This is the way horror movies were made back in the day. What can I say? It's the kind of thing that you can't help but enjoy. This has all kinds of special features on it, including a new audio commentary with author and historian Steve Haberman and Greg Mink, and some excerpts and interviews with the lead actress Simone Simon, and as well as some video stills. It's just beautiful. Produced by the great Val Lewton. Curse of the Cat People.
And got some stuff here from the Arrow collection, both Arrow Academy and regular Arrow. So, of course, the regular Arrow titles are more exploitation-y, and the Arrow Academy stuff is the artier stuff. I think at least one of these probably belongs in the other, but that's the Abel Ferrara, and Abel's always a thing. So I'm going to start off with the Duccio Tessari spaghetti western films, A Pistol for Ringo and The Return of Ringo. It's amazing how this spaghetti western stuff just keeps showing up, and so many directors made so many of these movies all around the same time, and yet somehow Ennio Morricone scored them all. I don't know how that works.
Yeah,
every last one of them.
Yeah,
whoever the director was. So the star of Tenebrae, the Dario Argento movie, Giuliano Gemma, is the star of Pistol for Ringo, where he has to kind of go undercover with a bunch of Mexican banditos to rescue Lorella DeLuce, and then of course Return of the Ringo. Now he's got he's kind of doing it again. It's basically revisits the same thing, except now it's a revenge thing. So it's become like Taken. Somehow every revenge movie is like Taken now. You ever notice that? Anyway, these films were hugely successful at the time. I had never really heard of them, but the music is worth checking out all by itself. Tons of extras on here, as per usual with all the Arrow stuff. There is also Vigil by Vincent Ward. Now, Vincent Ward kind of fell off the map a little bit here. The last thing that he did was What Dreams May Come, the Robin Williams film.
Yeah, Robin Williams.
That was supposed to be his big Hollywood debut or whatever, and it didn't really spark for him. So I guess he's gone back to New Zealand and continues to make movies there. Regardless, Vigil is the film that started it all for him. So this is the origin of Vincent Ward's filmmaking career. And it's actually a really good film, and I want him to come to make more stuff in Hollywood. This was screened in Cannes at the Cannes Film Festival in 1984, which was the very first time they had ever had a New Zealand film there, foreshadowing, a decade later, or less than a decade later, when I was there, and Jane Campion took home the big award for the piano.
Yeah.
So a lot of stuff was pioneered by this film. And it is very, very New Zealand. Now, New Zealand movies, as opposed to Australian movies, tend to have a much more mythical quality to them.
Yeah.
Partly because the Aboriginal population in Australia has not sort of fueled the filmmaking there with their culture.
The way the Maori have.
The way the Maori have.
Yeah, yeah.
It's very much. So Maori culture and, English colonial culture all sort of merge in their cinema, and Vigil is definitely one of those. I don't even know how to even give you the plot without giving too much away. But let's just say there's a stranger who shows up in a small New Zealand village at the same time that something else has happened. And these things coincide, and they are connected in a way that you will never ever figure out, and doesn't really even matter eventually. So it's a really, really great movie. It's very mystical and cool and gritty all at the same time. And then we also have The Addiction, the Abel Ferrara film, which is basically a vampire movie, but without vampires. Lily Taylor is great in this movie. The black and white photography is just stupendous. This really deserves to be an Arrow Academy movie, but I guess they consider it a little bit more culty and exploitation-y. Anyway, it's really, really eerie, and it tells you a lot about Abel Ferrara's state of mind at this particular point in time. The last two from Arrow Academy include Smash Palace, the first film by Roger Donaldson, who would, of course, go on to do things like No Way Out.
Oh, yeah, big job.
Yeah, and this again, a New Zealand director. This is a really, really interesting film, kind of the beginning of the New Zealand New Wave. Basically, it's a little bit more like an Australian film than a New Zealand film, though, and dealing with, family stresses and ruptured family, this, former auto racer and his wife and their child, and domestic issues that are still relevant today. So it's a pretty great movie. And what Smash Palace actually means, it's the name of a business in the movie, is very interesting. And then last one here from the Arrow Academy is Black Venus, which is the film that French director Abdelatif Kechiche made after The Secret of the Grain, which was amazing and which is one of my favorite films of the last 20 years. And the Cannes winner, Blue is the Warmest Color. Between the two, he made this movie, which didn't get as much attention, but it deserves your attention. This is the true story of Saartjie Baartman, who also was known under the moniker Hottentot Venus. And she was a South African woman who was taken from her home in South Africa and put on display, kind of like the Elephant Man in London, because of her body. Because being an African woman, she was of a curvier nature than they were accustomed to.
And now we know why Jessica Rabbit looks like that.
Yeah, that's right.
That's where that got started.
And it's a really a fascinating film with an amazing lead performance by the Cuban actor Yahima Torres. So, fascinating film, really beautifully done.
Let me knock these two off real quick. One of them, Night of the Lepus, 1972. What I love about this movie, giant rabbits who are giant rabbits.
Yeah.
Which is always cool. And 1972, pre-CGI, so the giant rabbits are just big-ass rabbits, man. Yeah. They just built some big-ass rabbits, shag carpeting and that kind of stuff. Yeah. You got yourself a giant rabbit. Other thing I like about this movie, DeForest Kelley. Bones from Star Trek, 1972. He's got hair, he's got mustache, he's wearing the little thing. So that's a lot of fun. Janet Leigh also in the movie along with Rory Calhoun on Blu-ray. All kinds of special features, including a new 2K scan here, audio commentary by Arthur Lee Gabon, and a couple of pop culture historians and whatnot. The other one I want to mention, Sweet Sweetback's badass song, of course, the wonderful
finally on Blu-ray.
Mario Van Peebles, the father of Mario Van Peebles, Melvin Van Peebles, finally on Blu-ray. Of course, this movie is a classic and legendary movie for a number of reasons. The content of the movie itself, when it came out, how he made it, how he marketed it, the career that it created for him, the career that it created for his son Mario, who, by the way, is in this movie.
Yeah.
Doing incredibly inappropriate things. Mario, cut that out. This is the story of a black gigolo. And he saves that Black Panther from the police. It's really, really a neat movie. Then he has to go on the run from the cops and other people who are after him. And the black community comes to his aid, along with the Hells Angels, which is kind of wacky. But nevertheless, that's what it's all about. Look, this movie is controversial for a bunch of reasons, but it's one of the movies, along with the Watermelon Man, that began the new wave of black cinema.
Yeah. And it's not,
carries on to this day.
it's often lumped in with the quote unquote blaxploitation era, but
no, this is pre
not,
that.
It's pre that.
Yeah.
It's stylistically really, really challenging. I mean, he does things here that are every bit as revolutionary from a standpoint of style as was Easy Rider.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All kinds of special features here. Newly scanned 35 from the 4K from the 35 millimeter original. Interviews with Melvin and Mario. Small documentaries, Q&A questions. All kinds of stuff here for people to check out, including a wonderful little booklet essay by Travis Crawford. Check that out. Sweet Sweetback's Badass Song.
And then a bunch here from Kino. Kino Classics, another release from the American Film Theater line, which continues to be something that kind of like almost a cult following for that. This is called Jacques Brel is Alive and Well and Living in Paris. This requires a little bit of explanation. Jacques Brel, for those who don't know, a very famous French crooner of a previous generation. And this movie was made in 1975, but it has a sensibility that was very much in Hollywood in the 1960s. It's kind of they want to say that it's a cabaret style musical, but it's really not quite that. It's they take a lot of Brel's songs and they turned them into English language songs, and then put it all into kind of a singing policeman kind of weird offbeat musical. And it's bizarre, and it's fascinating, and it's compelling. And when you watch it, you realize that it's movies like this that inspired things like One from the Heart and Xanadu. Really, that's sort of where this kind of musical filmmaking all begins. Anyway, it's a one-of-a-kind movie from 1975, and it's an anachronism, and it's weird, and it's cool all at the same time. A little bit more conventional. A bunch of interesting classics from the Kino Classics line. The Woman in the Window with Edward G. Robinson and Joan Bennett, directed by Fritz Lang during his noir period in Hollywood. And this also was written by Nunnally Johnson, who seems to be dominating the show today. A prolific screenwriter, and this is a really, really cool noir. Joan Bennett is kind of the femme fatale here, but it also has Raymond Massey, and it's a really cool stylized noir. Also have the Western The Big Country by William Wyler, which is not one of the greatest all-time westerns. It's a little bit bloated, but and Gregory Peck produced this as well as kind of a vehicle for himself and Gene Simmons, and it's loaded with stars. But what's commonly remembered about this film is that it has one of the all-time great scores, and Jerome Moss just nailed it for this. He was nominated for an Oscar, didn't win, incredibly, but it's one of the all-time great movie western scores in particular. I, Jane Doe is also quite fun. This is from a brand new 4K scan of the original 35 negative, and it looks gorgeous. So they got the original fine-grain neg from Paramount and just did a beautiful, beautiful transfer of it, scanning it in 4K. And this is kind of a forgotten film in many respects from 1948. It's a courtroom drama about an American pilot who has committed bigamy while in France. And I don't know if the story necessarily is as relevant today as it was then, but it's so beautifully, beautifully shot, and it's beautifully acted, and gosh, it just looks so gorgeous in their transfer. And then the last one here is Alfred Hitchcock's Under Capricorn, which is a really weird film for Hitchcock because it's a period film. This is also a 4K restoration. It's shot in color during his British period. This is 1949, before he came to Hollywood. Mm-hmm. And it's basically a for-hire gig. It's all takes place in Australia, and there's a guy from England played by Joseph Cotton, who's been banished there because he's a criminal. And then you have kind of a drawing room series of situations in Australia, which was not shot in Australia. It was shot by Jack Cardiff on a backlot in London. But here's the thing. There's a shot here that is one of those continuous, uninterrupted single-take shots, which is the first time Hitchcock tried that, and that's what led to Rope many years later. And that's why it's worth watching this, is to see certain stylistic things evolve. In any case, there's an audio commentary by the film historian Kat Ellinger, and some audio interviews, and then a thing on Claude Chabrol on Alfred Hitchcock, and the original trailer. So that is Under Capricorn. Absolutely worth checking out.
From MVD video, Jean-Claude Van Damme is Lionheart. Early Jean-Claude Van Damme,
Yeah.
I think it's about 1990 or so. He plays a French legionnaire who has to go and find his brother, and all this kind of stuff. Ends up fighting in sort of gladiator-style battles, that Jean-Claude Van Damme sort of way. I still say Jean-Claude Van Damme is the only actor ever to never speak a believable word of dialogue in a film. Not one, not ever. Never has said a word you actually believe in a film, Jean-Claude Van Damme, but that's okay because that's not his job. This thing is packed with all kinds of special features on it. Way too many to mention here. But if you're a Jean-Claude Van Damme aficionado and you just love it, you got to check it out.
Yeah.
That's one of those VHS sort of rentals from back in the day. Abominable, also from MVD. It stars Matt McCoy. Love Matt McCoy. Matt McCoy is in a movie called The Hand That Rocks the Cradle some years ago in the early 90s. Hell of a thriller. This is not quite as hell of a thriller as that. This is only like a 2006 film, but it is kind of neat. Involves the Sasquatch, the Yeti, the Bigfoot, that kind of thing. It's about a guy who gets paralyzed in a mountain climbing accident. Gets himself together, goes back out to the cabin in the woods, and who does he find? Bigfoot. Bigfoot is in the woods trying to kill the guy in the wheelchair.
Love it.
Hey, you gotta love a movie about a Bigfoot trying to kill a Yeti. A Yeti trying to kill a guy in a wheelchair.
Not enough Bigfoot and Yeti movies anymore, although Littlefoot is coming out
soon. Yes, indeed.
The animated film.
Again, packed with all kinds of neat and fun special features. Pick it up, check it out. It's a lot of fun.
All right, and now we're going to wrap the show out with our interview with our good friend Michael Schlesinger, and who just did the Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster, also from Kino. Michael is an amazing guy. He's the godfather of American repertory distribution. He worked at Paramount and Sony and MGM. It was not Sony when it was Columbia basically, specifically Columbia.
Yeah.
But he was part of the restoration of It's All True, the Orson Welles documentary from 1942.
Yeah.
And he's a really wonderful figure in American film life, and we are so grateful for him. And we sat down with him to talk about these amazing shorts in the Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. And without further ado, here is that interview. Tim and I are here, and we are unbelievably privileged to be doing an in-person interview with our friend Michael Schlesinger, who is considered one of the legendary figures. I'm getting the embarrassed smile. Who's a legendary figure in classic movie distribution and in many respects restoration as well. I mean, a fixture in It's All True, the Welles film.
Well, I've never done any actual restoration. The best I could say is that maybe I might have instigated some stuff, but I don't restore films.
It's in your blood, keeping it all alive. You know archivists, and you've worked with archivists.
Let's just say that the restorers are the chefs, and I'm the waiter.
There we go. Michael,
you're in the restaurant, baby. That matters.
Okay.
Yeah.
And by the way, we clearly have differing definitions of unbelievably privileged.
Well, you worked at MGM, Paramount, Columbia. You've been pivotal in keeping classic films alive for a very long time.
That I will cop to, yes.
And you have of course worked with TCM as well. And you have made a debut as a filmmaker now, and that's what we're talking to you primarily about today, because Kino Lorber has just released on DVD The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. The subtitle here is Two Madcap Morons on a Mission of Mayhem, and then you put the was that your idea to put the Orson Welles? It's terrific.
Xavier Carbaga, or AKA Leslie Carbaga, who designed the cover, he put the "It's terrific," which is
from Citizen Kane.
Citizen Kane.
That's great.
And I said, well, why not? It's the greatest directorial debut since Citizen Kane.
Well, this is a collection of short films, 5 in total, that you made over how long a period of time?
Okay, well, let's go. I don't know how much time we have.
Well, let's do it.
The history. Nick Santamaria and Will Ryan some years ago sort of created this 1930s style vaudeville comedy team called Biffle and Shooster. It was kind of an ad hoc thing. They, made occasional live appearances, things of that nature. Nick and another guy did some flash animations, but they were never really. The characters were kind of nebulous at best. And then one day, this would have been the summer of 2012, Nick posted on his Facebook page a photo of them in costume, holding up an empty picture frame and sort of like grinning through it. And then me being me, I posted as a comment, from their classic two-reeler, it's a frame-up with Franklin Pangborn as the art gallery owner. And then I thought about it, and I've had I have done some production. I co-produced some of Larry Blemeyer's movies. I obviously was involved in It's All True. I wrote and produced and voice directed the American version of Godzilla 2000, which really was a crash course in post-production. And I've been trying to sell scripts for some time, and the problem is that the kind of things I want to do are not the kind of things the studios want to make. So I thought a light went off, and I thought, well, why not actually make a Biffle and Shooster short and then use it as kind of a calling card. And so I emailed them and said, what do you guys think? And they said, well, of course, well, let's do it. So I wrote a script. I went on Kickstarter, fell short by a razor-thin 89%. And I thought, well, what the heck? I was comfortably well off, as Daffy Duck would say. So I figured I can pay for it myself. So we then shot it in December of 2012. Fortunately, I have a lot of actor friends, and I knew a lot of the Larry Blemeyer people, both sides of the camera. So I had no problem getting a cast and a crew. And the Kyoto brothers actually rented us their studio for a very good friend's price, because we shot it in December, and they're normally dark that month anyway. So it was found money for them. We were freezing our asses off, but we got it done. And then the problem was we'd get around, and the problem with film festivals is that film festivals want bleak and depressing and soul-crushing and, subtitled people being oppressed in a third world country, directed by Angelina Jolie. And guys in hats making stupid puns and hitting each other with their hats and things like that.
Ostensibly in the 30s.
Yes, black and white. It's too frivolous. We just can't have frivolous. Our audience doesn't want frivolous. And even my friend Cheryl Boone Isaacs, who came to the screening, and she said, "Here's the problem. Nobody's going to notice how well made it is, how funny it is, how inexpensively you did it for. All they're going to see is black and white and guys in hats telling jokes they don't get." And in a way, she was right, So I have this one short. What am I going to do with it? And then I said, well, the only thing I can do is bite the bullet and make more. And then that way, we've at least got enough for a DVD.
Yeah.
And, theoretically, we could put some of them together and make a theatrical, like they used to do the Three Stooges, Laugh-O-Rama, that kind of thing. So I bit the bullet again, and we made 4 more. We actually did a 5th. We did a one-reel Vitaphone short from 1928, which is on the DVD as an extra. But we shot that literally half an hour right after a lunch break. The boys had written the script themselves. So we just set up the cameras, rolled it, and we were done. So
great.
And then we shot it. We did a bunch of extra things too. We did on Imitation of Wife. We had talked about in the early days of sound, they would sometimes do foreign language versions of films, because silent films, obviously, you could just replace the intertitles. You can't do that with a talkie. And I'm sure a lot of people have seen, for example, some of the Spanish Laurel and Hardy, where they were reading the lines phonetically, or, of course, the Spanish Dracula. Mm-hmm. So after we wrapped one scene in Imitation of Wife, I said, this is a good time. Let's do the Spanish one. So we just did the scene again. I just rolled the camera and let them ad-lib in a combination of Spanish, Spanglish, and gibberish until they were tired, and then we just cut. And it came out great. And then we picked up some odd bits later on. As a lot of people know, I think It's a Mad World is the greatest movie ever. I'm sorry, let me rephrase. The greatest movie ever, with the periods. like on The Simpsons. And everybody's teasing me about Biffle and Shooster having their cameo cut out of the movie. And then one day, like a couple years later, I thought, you know what? Why don't we just do that? So we went up into Chatsworth, up in the mountains near where some of Mad World was actually shot. And my costume designer found a couple of the old-fashioned prison costumes, with the vertical stripes and even a plastic ball and chain. And we did a very quick scene where they're hitchhiking, like they've just escaped from prison. And the joke was that as the cars go by, they get splashed with buckets of water. And then they do all their old catchphrases. And that was it. It was like 45 seconds. And we matted it to 2.76:1, so it looked like it was shot in Ultra Panavision. And then while we were there, and they were already in their old age makeup, we then shot an interview with them and doing basically the Sunshine Boys as a couple of old Jews, and in their prison costumes, and we just rolled the cameras, and again they ad-libbed for 10 minutes in character, and it was hilarious. And then we put that on the DVD. What we did was the supposition was that a local TV station had filmed shot the interview, ahead of time, and then when their scene got cut for the movie, the footage was just lying in the vaults for 50 odd years until it was discovered, and then we faded it to magenta.
That's so
like
great.
old Eastman.
That's so great. Well, the shorts that are included here are The Biffle Murder Case, Imitation of Wife, which I think is the greatest pun ever, Schmoboat, Bride of Finkelstein, It's a Frame Up, which was the first one you shot.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the last in the fake timeline.
Yeah.
And one thing I wanted to do, because back when I was at Columbia, Sony, people want to do Three Stooges festivals, and I would always, try to arrange them very carefully, because the one thing you don't want to do, especially with the Stooges, is the one thing you want to do is avoid repetition.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to do this here, so I wanted to make sure that not only were all the shorts different from each other, but that they were different in each short, how they responded to material. So in one short, they're behaving like Abbott and Costello, and another, they're more like Laurel and Hardy, and another, they're more like Hope and Crosby. Fitting, so that way their characterizations change a little bit as well. They're still recognizably Biffle and Shooster. But, for example, in Biffle Murder Case, Schuster's constantly slapping and hitting Biffle, poking him in the eyes, all the traditional Mo Howard stuff. In Imitation of Wife, where they have to work together because they've got a problem, Shooster doesn't hit Biffle at all. Well, he does. He stomps his foot one time. But that's it. And, of course, there's none of that in Schmoboat because, again, they are playing themselves because it's a review. So they're not playing they're not like Hope and Crosby playing, their characters in a road movie. They're Hope and Crosby as they really are in real life. So and I think that's one of the reasons that we worked very hard to make these all different from each other. So people, if they wanted to, could watch them all at once and not feel that they were being clobbered over the head by the same jokes over and over again, unless it was a specifically designated running line, like "I'm innocent, I tell you innocent," that kind of thing.
That's great. I mean, they're so much fun to watch.
Thank you.
I've always wanted to ask you about is this: from a filmmaking standpoint, being someone who is a film historian and a scholar of style, movies have changed a lot over the decades. You can tell a 1930s film from a 40s, from a 50s, from 60s, from the 70s, from the way they are shot. So consciously, how did you go about saying, I've got to make sure I'm going to shoot it a certain way so that it's unmistakably of the era?
Well, I have an authenticity fetish, as I like to say. So I was absolutely dead sure I wanted to make unsuspecting people think that they really are watching something that's 80 years old. We've actually pulled that off in a few instances. But here's the thing. It's like I grew up on this stuff, as did Will and Nick. It is, as I've said, it is in our DNA. We eat, sleep, breathe, live this kind of comedy. So it's not that difficult. When you've seen so many of them, you sort of just instinctively know how it should be shot. For example, if you notice in today's movies, whenever there's a close-up, the top of the frame will always be cropping the heads off of people, right, almost down to the eyebrows. And then there'd be all this dead space under their chin. And you think it's misframed, but no, it's Panavision. It can't be misframed. And now that it's digital, you can't misframe anyway. But somehow it was consciously shot like that. And that's not how things were shot back then. So I told the camera operators, I said, headroom. I always want to see not just the top of their heads, but the top of their hats. And there should be a little space in between because that's how pictures looked back then. we shot them, in a 30 style, which is the camera only moves when it needs to follow action. I liked long takes, and I know actors like long takes because they get to show off. And of course, since these guys supposedly came from vaudeville, they were used to doing their act in one. So we did long takes as much as we could. And in Frame Up, I wrote a complete Abbott and Costello style routine called Oil or Water. And I said, we're going to do this in one take. And it took 12. And that's with a few false starts within the 12. I'd say, all right, back to one, try again. And then we did the 13th wild take because they wanted to ad lib a little bit, which we did. But the 12th take was the one where they were like 98% there. And I said, that's good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. How long did it take to shoot all of them all together? Over how many? I mean, it took quite a while. I mean, individually, I think you're shooting for a couple of weeks or something.
No. We shot Frame Up was 3 full days and 2 half days spread out over the course of a week. Because there were a couple of days where we did exteriors, which was a pain in the ass, and I don't want to do that again. I have to. On the other 4, what we rented a studio for a month, which they loved, because this was a studio that generally had people come in for maybe 2 days to shoot a commercial or a music video. So to have one stage occupied for a whole month was heaven for them. And again, they gave us a very nice deal. So what we did was we spent the first week building the sets and rigging the lights. And then we shot 4 days. We shot Imitation of Wife first. So that was 4 days we shot that. We then took 2 days off while they redressed the set and relit the set. Then shot Biffle Murder Case for 4 days. Took another 2 days off, redressed the set for Bride of Finkelstein. Shot that in 3 1/4 days. We actually wrapped early on that one, so everybody got a 3/4 of a day off. 2 more days to redress the set, and then we shot Schmoboat in 3 days.
That's amazing.
And then 1 day to strike the sets, and boom, we were out. Well, back then, the old shorts, the Columbia 2-reelers, even at the beginning, they were shooting them in 4 days because you figure you're looking at 20 minutes of film. That's about 5 minutes a day. That's actually pretty good. If you multiply it, let's say you make an 80-minute movie, you quadruple that. That's 16 days. And back then, for a non-A picture, that was about right.
Less than a month to knock it off. What is the genesis of your very specific interest in this kind of comedy, this period? You just grew up watching it and loved it and hung on to it?
And the 30s is my favorite decade. It is for a lot of us. And it just feels like home. Does that make sense?
No, yeah. Look, I grew up watching this stuff too. The Abbott and Costellos, the Bowery Boys, all of these sort of things. Really, take it all the way back to the Little Rascals if you had to.
Sure.
And there's a certain style of comedy. It has a certain sort of pace to it. Even William Powell and Malloy, some of what they were doing, the Thin Man series is what you're talking about.
It's it was it was unfussy. Maybe that's the word we're looking for. But it was bright and snappy because especially in the earlier part of the decade, people were in the middle of the Depression. They wanted to go to the theaters to, if they could afford it even, to have their burdens light. They want to escape the cares of the day for 3 or 4 hours and relax with a double feature and a short and a cartoon and whatever, and a 2-reel comedy and even a serial chapter, whatever happened to be playing. They just wanted to escape the everyday world. I think we've taken that too far now. We escape reality.
Yeah, well, the everyday world is,
Yeah, but it's the same thing now more than ever. I think you want to escape.
Yeah.
But it's tough, because comedy has changed. That kind of traditional vaudeville style comedy, slapstick and snappy one-liners and things like that, that ran about a century and then kind of frittered away in the 80s. And now we have this sort of smug condescending thing, where it's all attitude. You don't even need jokes. And it's all basically toilet-based humor or sex-based humor because we've become so politically correct. You can't do anything that's ethnic-based or even nationality-based without people screaming at you. And so this is all that's left. And I think people have that kind of comedy basically exists anymore only on the stage. There's a wonderful play on Broadway right now called The Play That Goes Wrong, which is a hilarious old-fashioned farce. and on some sitcoms, especially the multicam ones, which are still joke oriented, like The Big Bang Theory, where it's still joke oriented because you've got an audience there in the studio, and you have to make them laugh.
Well, I think the availability of this could change that. I think if enough people see this, they'll realize that there's a hope for this. There's a future for this kind of stuff.
I'd like to think so.
Is there a chance there will be more Biffle and Shooster?
Well, I call this zombie vaudeville. It's like we're bringing it back from the dead. Well, certainly we'd like there to be more. I mean, I would like to see it continue as a streaming series, on Netflix or Amazon or Hulu. We do these things very cheaply. I mean, even with everybody working for their normal price, we could probably do these things for like $125,000 each. And I've read that the average episode of The Man in the High Castle costs $11 million. And I think we could probably do hundreds of Biffle for that kind of money. And I've got titles and log lines and assorted jokes for at least 25 more. And Jesse Levy, who co-starred in one of the shorts, has written 3 scripts on his own. We've been dicking around with the idea for a feature, as well as a fake episode of their radio show. They've continued to make live appearances when they can. We've actually recorded several of those, and they're thinking of maybe editing some of that into a separate DVD. So, all things are possible. It's going to have to be somebody else's money at this point. I've used up all my man money. And B, being an old person, I've got so many other things I'd like to do while I'm still ambulatory. So I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't mind making a couple more, but I think at some point somebody else is going to have to take over and do them. Because, like I say, I've got other things I'd like to do and not a lot of time to do that. My great regret is that maybe, this didn't happen 30 years ago, but, we can't cry over what might have been.
Well, to segue just from that to something more general, having sort of seen so much over the course of your career in terms of how people are receptive to older movies and newer movies, one of the gripes that we have on this podcast is that so many of the studios now seem to be forgetting their libraries. They seem to be just sort of throwing them under the bus. And I'm not going to name the studios, but there are 2 in particular that seem to have absolutely no concern whatsoever for their libraries.
I'd say more than 2. But you also have to remember that studios are not necessarily monoliths. So most of the studios, and that includes Universal, and that includes Sony, and that includes Fox, and certainly Warner Brothers, their asset management departments are preserving things, not just features, but also shorts and cartoons and even serials. But what's happening is, after those films are being preserved, they're just going back up on the shelf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the problem. As I like to say, preservation without access is kind of pointless. Because what's the point of saving a movie if nobody gets to see it? I was very, very blessed. I had friends at Universal in their asset management department who, as they were screening the check prints for the things they were preserved, they invited me to come to the screenings. And in fact, I was giving them suggestions because they said quite bluntly, once they preserved all the A pictures, they're now looking at literally thousands of B movies, and they said, we have no idea what any of this stuff is. Tell us what's good. So I gave them some suggestions. When I ran out, they just started picking titles at random, and I sat there watching these things, and they're absolutely wonderful. But at the same time, there was this chilling thought that there would be maybe 3 or 4 of us in the screening room, and I'm thinking, we're the first people to see these pictures in 60, 70, 80, 90, even 100 years. And we may be the last people to see them. And it's thrilling and it's frightening and depressing all at the same time. Now, I help run a classic film festival called Cinecon, which runs every Labor Day weekend here in Los Angeles. And a lot of those pictures we've been getting out and on the big screen, and the studios are happy to provide them because they know at least somebody's going to see them, and they are going to be appreciated. Last year, for example, one of the things I wanted to show was a picture called Power of the Press, which Sam Fuller wrote in 1943 before he became a director. And I particularly wanted to show it because it's literally about fake news. And it also co-stars Lee Tracy. So it's like the only newspaper picture to involve the two great icons of newspaper pictures, Sam Fuller and Lee Tracy. And it, forgive the cliche, it blew the roof off the dome. People were screaming and cheering and going nuts. And I thought, for the 64-minute B picture. And I thought, boy, if I'd known it was going to get this kind of reaction, I would have given it a better time slot. But we also ran a Universal picture called North of the Klondike with Andy Devine and Broderick Crawford, Lon Chaney, and Evelyn Ankers. Again, just a 60-minute B picture, about, loggers up in the timberland and all that. And that got an incredible reaction, too. And we've run a lot of Universal swing musicals over the years, and they cheer and they love it. I mean, granted, it's, preaching to the choir, but there's no reason those pictures can't appeal to other people as well if they give them a chance. I mean, we're nuts. I mean, every time a beloved character actor comes on, like Franklin Pangborn or Shemp Howard or Charles Lane or Jack Norton or Roscoe Carnes, we all go, yeah, because we love them. They didn't get that in 1942, but today we treasure those people for what they bring to every movie. They're kind of like family. And in a sense, that's sort of, bringing it back to Biffle and Shooster for just a moment. That's sort of what I tried to do then, because the supporting actors aren't playing the characters. They're playing the actors playing the characters. Mm-hmm. So I've told this story before, but I'll repeat it again. Imitation of Wife is the typical bringing the boss home for dinner scenario. And for a role like that, you think Vernon Dent, the guy who was in all the Three Stooges shorts, the big heavy-set guy with the mustache who gave the world the phrase, "Hey, where are those three new guys?" right after this loud crash. And so I called up my actor friend Glenn Toronto, and I said, "How'd you like to play Vernon Dent?" He said, "Oh, I'd love it." I said, "Great, grow a mustache." And that is literally all the direction I gave him. He showed up on the set the first day. He was Vernon Dent. I didn't have to tell him how to do a single thing. He knew exactly what to do, and he was fabulous. So, and obviously that makes directing an actor a lot easier, too, if they're literally playing somebody else. But that level of familiarity for, film buffs who say, oh, he's playing Vernon Dent, and watching as he does all the typical Dent things. In Frame Up, Bob Picardo plays Arthur Houseman, who was one of the great character drunks. And I sent him a link to a Laurel and Hardy short called Scram, where Houseman is particularly featured. And I told the actors, you don't have to do a full-on impression. You can just suggest the character. Robert did a full-on. He came on. He absolutely became Arthur Houseman. It was scary how much he channeled him. At least one person said it almost looked like you dug Houseman back up from the dead and put him back to work.
That's great.
And, and again, so that adds an extra level of fun, for people who realize he's not just playing a drunk, he's playing a guy who was famous for playing a drunk.
Yeah. Which is a level of engagement that's really, really neat for the audience. If you know what you're looking at and you know what they're doing, that's a lot of fun.
And that's another thing we kind of miss about movies today, is that we don't have that great community of character actors who would show up in film after film, generally always playing the same type of character. You wanted a grumpy old man, you got Charles Lane. You wanted a fussy floor walker or maitre d', you got Franklin Pangborn. You wanted a drunk, you got Jack Norton. That kind of thing. And
there were things that Agnes Moorehead did. There were things that William Fred Mertz from there were things.
William
that these
Frawley,
guys did,
yes,
so.
very much so. And you don't have those kind of character actors anymore. You've got the star, and then you got a bunch of blank faces. I always say, you remember a few years ago there was a movie called Snakes on a Plane, and it was Samuel L. Jackson and Kenan Thompson and Juliana Margulies, and then a bunch of nobodies, who apparently were cast for their hotness rather than their ability to act. Yeah. And then you look at this movie, and you think, if this had been made back in the 40s, every single person sitting on that airplane would have been a familiar face, and every single person would have been playing the persona that we associate with them, and it would have been absolutely delightful. And here you had three actors who basically had to carry the movie themselves, with 20 other people who were just complete loxes.
Yeah. Well, it is wonderful. There's a ton of stuff on here in the extras, bloopers and outtakes, and obviously all the other fun stuff that you shot. The DVD is The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. Michael Schlesinger, thank you so much for sitting with us and talking to us about it.
Thank you for having me.
A lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, folks.
It's a lot of fun. You got to get it. We're going to put this right at the top of your gift list, your to-buy list, whatever list you have. The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster.
I'll tell you another thing. Surprise yourself. I teach a lot of film, particularly young people.
Yeah.
Show this to kids. Show this to kids. young people, even 12th, they will find this absolutely hysterical. I promise you they will.
Do I have time for an anecdote?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. We ran Bride of Finkelstein a few years ago at Cinefest, which is a similar festival in Syracuse. No longer, they ended. And some woman came up to me a little after the short. She had dragged her 17-year-old daughter to watch these old movies. And she hated every single thing she saw except Bride of Finkelstein. The kid said she loved it. Are there more like this? And I thought that may have been the greatest compliment I'd ever gotten. So yes, and because these were made in the 30s, they're sort of technically family friendly, and because there is so much silliness and slapstick, I always say yes. Show your kids this. Say they'll like it. Yeah, it's in black and white, but children don't really mind that much. We didn't mind when we were kids, and they'll respond to the goofiness, and they'll like it. And we had the same thing with The Lost Skeleton of Cadavra. We had people telling us that kids as young as 3 were enjoying the heck out of it, even if they didn't understand all the jokes.
I will follow your anecdote with my anecdote and close with this. I grew up, as both of you did, on stuff like this. There used to be a theater in Century City here back in the 70s that would show reels of old classic movies, oftentimes silent. And my father, who had worked in Hollywood back in the 1930s, would take me there on Saturdays, and we'd sit there and we'd watch Laurel and Hardy, their silence, their sounds. We'd watch Chaplin, and I loved it. It was some
was
of
this
my.
a silent movie theater on Fairfax?
No, this was in Century City in the old ABC Entertainment Center. Yeah.
Not the Plit.
It was below the Plit. It was on the
really?
level below them, and it was
Wow.
just a small tiny
Must have
venue.
been before my time.
And it was it was really extraordinary, and I've tried to replicate some of that. My daughter is 5, and Friday nights now is our old black and white movie night, and we've been showing her the movies. And if you ask her what movies have you seen lately, she will tell you Double Indemnity, Sunset Boulevard,
Good for her.
Gold Diggers of 1935. She
Great.
knows the titles.
I have a friend like that in Cincinnati who has been showing old movies to his grandson, and his favorite is Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein.
That's great.
To the point where every time they're going to watch a new movie, the kid always says, "Are Chick and Wilbur in this one?"
Oh, that's great. That's fantastic.
Abbott and Costello win.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you. It has
Thank
been
you.
a pleasure, and we highly urge all of our listeners, go out and grab The Misadventures of Biffle and Shooster. You will not be disappointed.